Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show as we inch ever closer to transfer deadline day. I can feel the nerves and the tension of every single Arsenal fan flowing through me with pure hesitation, apprehension, and basically fear by this point that nothing's going to happen. We're hoping that something does. And to kind of quell your frustrations, I say that if anything, it's going to cause you more frustration. Talking about players that we could have signed, probably won't sign, and we even might be seeing leave very soon. I'm joined by a fantastic guest, Alvaro Romeo. Sorry, how are you doing, mate? You good?
Very well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. How are you?
I'm very good. Do you want to just introduce yourself to the listeners and let people know who exactly you are?
Of course, I am a man with a double identity at the minute. I cover Premier League in Spanish for TalkSport International, and then I cover La Liga for the Totally Football Show in English, also for the BBC as a contributor, and Fox Sports Asia. So yeah, this is my job. I cover basically both Premier League and La Liga. Premier League in Spanish, and La Liga in English language.
There you go. I mean, multilingual, fantastic sort of culture clashes going on there. And long-time listeners of the show will know that I am a huge fan of La Liga and do tune in for a fair amount of it. I mean, people know my love of Marco Asensio mainly. I've got an Espanyol shirt with his name on the back from his time on loan there. And I'm writing a piece about him now, which is quite a joy. But I couldn't help but bring him up once, but I will detract myself away from him to talk about more Arsenal-related things, however much I wish he was related to Arsenal, but he isn't. In terms of Atletico Madrid is kind of the main focus of where Arsenal has been this summer. And the two players, well, let's talk about the initial man in the picture, which is, of course, right now, Lucas Torreira. Looks like he is on his way, barring any issues with Atletico being able to sell either Herrera or Lemar, it seems. What are your thoughts around this move? Do you think it's an intelligent move for Torreira? And what do you make of it being a loan with only an option rather than an obligation?
Well, I think that number one, I have to say that Lucas Torreira could fit in a Diego Simeone team, but I don't know how much he's going to play. So if you are looking for minutes and to have quality time, perhaps Lucas Torreira is not going to find a lot of that at Atletico de Madrid because Thomas, Saúl, and Koke, they seem to be playing all the important games. All that said, it's time for Lucas Torreira to prove himself. I think that under Unai Emery, especially at the beginning of the 2018-2019 season, he was very good. Then he got some physical issues. Then obviously sometimes his passing game wasn't the perfect one for what Unai Emery wanted. And with Mikel Arteta, he has become like the third or the fourth midfielder in the squad, to the point that El Neni seems to be ahead of him, at least at the beginning of the season. So Lucas Torreira needs to play. He probably needs some fresh air, and Atletico de Madrid will be probably a good destination to learn how to master the midfield role, especially from a defensive point of view. But I don't know if he's going to play a lot over there. I say again, Atletico de Madrid has good specialists in those positions, and the fact that an excellent player like Héctor Herrera, who was more than proven when he passed from Porto to Atletico de Madrid, has barely played at Atletico de Madrid, tells you that it's not very easy to catch the eye of Simeone, and definitely it's not very easy to seduce him, to put it some sort of way, and find a chance under his coaching.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because when you look at that side and the depth of talent in that midfield that Atletico currently have, that you want to move away from Arsenal to ideally get minutes. And as you bring up there, seeing where those minutes are going to come from, I struggle with. I want to actually not go off on too big of a tangent, but I saw some really sort of strong links between Atletico Madrid and Marc Roca, who obviously was relegated with Espanyol. That kind of went very quiet quite quickly. Are you aware of anything in terms of that situation? What went on? Why they didn't necessarily push for Roca?
I was much more aware about the interest on Lucas Torreira. The Marc Roca thing could happen, of course, because he's a player who definitely wants to stay in the top flight, and he's a good midfielder, even though last season he was sometimes a shadow of himself, of what he was before. But obviously I put all that down to the fact that Espanyol collectively wasn't doing well. They had three managers in the same season. And Marc Roca could be a good addition for Atletico de Madrid, even though I think that he doesn't have yet the work rate that is required to play for Atletico de Madrid. So, number one, Atletico de Madrid has to offload players because they've got a huge salary wage. I think that Herrera or Lemar especially could be those players that Atletico de Madrid will be very happy to offload, preferably in a transfer rather than a loan. But not until that happens, Atletico de Madrid will be completely free to make a move or to cash some decent money for a player or to offer a good salary. So let's see what happens. I also believe that there are always panic buy-ins. Like, for example, Arsenal this weekend will play against Sheffield United. And I think that if the thing doesn't go too well, maybe, it's possible that there is a little bit more pressure from the owners, to buy. Or same thing may happen to Atletico de Madrid. They only got a draw this midweek in their game. So if they lose this weekend, for example, I wouldn't be surprised if finally they go and trigger one of those players or operations that they are interested in. But as I said before, very cautiously, because Atletico de Madrid is not especially well when it comes to their finances.
Yeah, that draw from Atletico really frustrated me. I kind of looked at that season, or this season rather, for them as a real chance to kind of push with Barcelona in a bit of a limbo situation of Koeman coming in and Messi being Messi at the moment, and we're not really sure what type of, we are sure what type of Messi we get. We get the Messi that we always expect, but there was that chance I felt for Atleti to really push on this season with Suarez coming in and giving that added sort of goal threat. And last season, they kind of lacked that ability to kill off games, to win games and get the points that they needed. And Suarez, I thought, would give them that. But maybe they're still sort of reeling from last season a bit with that result we saw at the weekend. Anyway, the main guy that Arsenal fans wanted this summer, along with Alvaro, was Thomas Partey. He's been continuously linked with Arsenal. Arsenal fans are very aware of the fact that Atleti have said from the start, it is either the release clause or he does not leave. That is the way. They want him to stay. Do you think that Arsenal are making a mistake by prioritising an Aouar, a creative type of player, than going for a Thomas Partey type of player?
It's difficult to say. I wouldn't say that Arsenal is making a mistake, because Aouar has that creativity that can help Arsenal a lot. But perhaps you've got that player in Dani Ceballos, even though, who knows, maybe Ceballos is not playing for Arsenal in 2 years' time. And if you can sign Aouar, that would be excellent. I think that, and this is a footnote apart from the conversation, but I think that Arsenal had, like 6-7 years ago, a tremendous quality in the midfield with Ozil, Cazorla, Ramsey. They could make perfect triangles, and their passing ability was excellent. And I think that they have lost a little bit of that in detriment of more directness, perhaps. And Aouar is the kind of player that could link a little bit the Arsenal from the past with the Arsenal from the present. All that said, maybe if Arsenal needs a replacement for Saka or an upgrade on him, Thomas Partey will be the perfect player for that, because I believe that positionally can be as good as Granit Xhaka. At the end of the day, he has worked under Simeone, and at the same time he's got something that Saka doesn't necessarily have, which is the ability to run 10-15 meters with the ball and manage to break a line on his own to drive the ball. And I think that Saka doesn't exactly do that. So I think that Thomas Partey is the kind of player that Arsenal would have benefited a lot from having. But at the same time, there was never a convincing offer from Arsenal. There was never a convincing move, just interest, but that is not enough, obviously, because Thomas Partey plays for Atletico de Madrid, and Atletico wants to cash good money for him if he leaves. And that is the reason simply why Thomas Partey is still there. He's got a contract until 2023. He was never going to depart on the cheap. And was he going to be a great player for Arsenal? I think that he's an upgrade on Granit Xhaka, even though the Swiss player is playing good now. But he's not going to leave for peanuts, man. I mean, he's going to stay there until a proper offer arrives. Otherwise, Atletico de Madrid, if they want to find a player, the quality of Thomas Partey, they will have to pay a lot of money, and they have already that player.
Talk me through the release clause kind of process in Spain, because I'm not massively in the know about how it works. If I tell you where my head's at with it, then you can correct any mistakes I make. Where I'm at is that the player themselves has to go to La Liga to pay their own release. Is that correct? Is that how it kind of works?
Yes, of course. But the player, obviously, gets that fee from the buying club. So yeah, it
Yes.
goes like this. Normally, it's not the player who goes there and pays exactly, but it's more like his agent or his representatives who do all that job, you know. But yeah, it's a system that, in my opinion, the release clause one, it's staying or is getting a little bit updated. And let me explain you why. Do you remember when Premier League signed that super contract with to sell the foreign rights? That was in 2015, I believe. Suddenly, all the Premier League clubs had a lot more money, and they could pay much more for their signings. And suddenly, the Spanish or the La Liga release clauses became outdated because Premier League clubs suddenly could pay 15 million or 20 million for any player, and that was like a very average or a very normal release clause in Spanish football. I think that the system of having a release clause doesn't make any sense. Since when does the selling club put the price first? Normally, it has to be the buying person who says, "Okay, I'm up to pay this money for this player." And the system is outdated. There are clubs like Athletic de Bilbao, my club, that now, whenever they extend the contract of a player, normally they don't put a release clause on him because I think that that's better. And yeah, so Thomas Partey has at the minute, I believe, a 45 million pounds release clause, and Arsenal hasn't met those requirements.
So did you say, sorry, just to touch on something you said, Athletic Club are no longer putting release clauses on their players, is that right?
Yeah, they've done it like that, for example, with Iker Muniain, one of the best players in the club. I mean, the last time his contract got extended, instead of putting a ridiculous 500 million release clause on the player, they just decided that, look, no release clause for you, and if the time comes and you want to leave, or if the time comes and we want to sell you, so we'll probably look for the agreement that matches how your form is. And I believe that system makes more sense, which is the system that you got in Premier League, for example.
Yeah, for sure. I think back to the Martin Braithwaite example at Leganés, who was completely taken advantage of, I suppose, by the exception that Barcelona were given to sign the player outside of the window, and that kind of really led to a bit of their demise that season as well, losing one of their key goal scorers. So yeah, it's definitely, I agree with you, it's a system that needs to change in La Liga and needs to protect those clubs that have those valuable assets, for sure.
Especially because not every league has the same financial muscle, and that makes a difference. I mean, when La Liga was one of the richest leagues in the world, maybe they were the richest one at the beginning of the 21st century. I'm not too sure about that, but I'm talking, making my own calculation of the basis, or on the basis of the players that La Liga had at the turn of the century. The release clause made more sense when no one from a foreign league could come and buy your players. But if the Premier League, for example, has such a strong possibility of buying and so much money, then domestically your release clauses may make sense, but in the international scene, they just don't make any.
No, they don't. As I said before, it just completely loses that control that the selling club has on any player that they have at their club, to lose that asset so easily. Talk me through then the sticking with this kind of release clause thing. If Arsenal were to say something with the Alvaro deal goes wrong, that they get enough money that they instead want to switch targets to Partey, there is mere days left of the window. How long does sort of a process take that it could get to the last day? Say we lose to Sheffield United and we get desperate. Would Arsenal still have effectively enough time to pay the clause by Monday's deadline and get Partey in, for instance?
Yeah, that's possible. I believe that there is always a deadline, which is midnight, and it has been done. I think that La Liga, imagine that there is some sort of admin mistake in the paying. La Liga, I believe that they could give you a little truce, like 10 minutes after midnight, something like that, just to complete all the proceedings. So, yeah, this is possible unless you are Real Madrid and Manchester United with David De Gea. Which is something that didn't happen. I think that you remember that one, yeah.
But fax machine, was it, that went wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that at that time Real Madrid wasn't that interested in David De Gea. Really, they just realized that they didn't need the goalkeeper, and that's why the thing didn't go ahead. But yeah, it would be possible. Let's say that Arsenal says on Monday they wake up and they have a talk in the directing board and they decide that the target is identified, and Thomas Partey is that one. It could be all done on a Monday, of course it could. Atletico de Madrid has been a selling club as well. All those engines are very well greased, and Arsenal and Atletico, they are professional clubs, and they could do it very quickly. Yes.
Okay, so that's good. I mean, it's kind of good to know that something could still happen. Arsenal fans will be on the edge of their seats, I'm sure, right up until the deadline of hearing anything. You know what it's like on deadline day. It goes absolutely crazy in the industry for us guys. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for sure. Let's kind of look at the Spanish links within Arsenal currently. It's nice to talk about certainties rather than possibilities, I think. Mikel Arteta, since taking over Arsenal in really kind of odd circumstances. Unai Emery, first of all, came to the end of his time. Freddie Ljungberg takes over. Mikel Arteta takes over from him. How much have you sort of been looking at Arsenal this season and thinking what kind of job Arteta has done? So initially, what did you expect him to do? And do you think he's exceeded those expectations that you had?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that Mikel Arteta had always great coaches, and he's been working under Guardiola, and that has to be a positive thing. But who knows the job you are going to do at the end of the day? And I believe that from the very beginning, he had a plan. He had the discipline as well. I think that at Arsenal, all the players have to work hard, or otherwise the thing doesn't work. And we have seen that, for example, with Matteo Guendouzi, a player that for any reason he just didn't seem to fit under Mikel Arteta, and he has had to depart. And I think that the discipline is one of the key things with Mikel Arteta, and also his religious belief on what he does, because Arsenal is trying to play the ball from the back, and they have scored like really important goals like that against Fulham, against Chelsea, Manchester City as well. Yeah. Trying to have a style from the very beginning. Mikel Arteta has been adamant that was possible to do, and he has changed the club completely, in the sense that Arsenal is no longer a team that suffers ridiculous defeats. I think that this is a legacy that stayed with Arsenal from the last years of Arsene Wenger. The fact that Arsenal was keen and very likely to sometimes lose in a ridiculous way, to the point of social media mockery. And Unai Emery couldn't correct that, and Mikel Arteta has done it. For example, the other day against Liverpool, I saw an Arsenal team that they were so competitive against probably one of the best teams in Europe, and they were capable of capitalizing on the other team's mistakes. They never lost the composure, and nobody seems to be aloof. I mean, Mesut Ozil, for example, in the past was a player whose body language didn't seem to fit for Arsenal. For Mikel Arteta, he is not playing now. The young players, they are coming with such a guilt and such a hunger to play well, and that's all down to Mikel Arteta. And also, he's got very clear ideas. When Arsenal loses and they deserve to lose, he says that. And when Arsenal wins, I think that in the locker room, he's probably asking for more and more and more. And this is the key with Arsenal. They have improved in so many areas: the defense, they attack better, the transitions are better, and this is all down to the manager. I'm really, really surprised about Mikel Arteta, and really pleased with his work.
What do you make of his temperament as a manager? Because we often do live shows on the channel, so there's a chat box going around, and there's listeners to the show throwing in questions, and a lot of people get quite kind of frustrated sometimes about what he's like in press conferences. In fact, I was doing a show earlier today in which someone described him as a bit of a puppet, like Wenger was to the owners, that he doesn't really speak his mind in press conferences. He doesn't really talk about what needs to be said. He kind of deflects questions a little bit in a Wenger-esque sort of way. What do you make of him in those scenarios? And do you think he's actually right to be saying the things that he's kind of saying in those press conferences?
Well, I think Mikel Arteta is a representative of the club, and he, as a manager, he is the main spokesman of Arsenal, because he talks to media at least twice or three times a week. So in that respect, he has to do that job as well. So I don't think that he's too corporate, personally. I believe that he looks sometimes ice cold when he talks to media, which can be a little bit difficult to understand for a journalist, or he can put like a barrier between media and himself, and he looks like a difficult person to interview, not because he's rude or anything, but because sometimes he sounds a bit ruthless to me, and definitely very, very direct. But I think that from the personality, I mean, there is very little to question about this man. I mean, he has never sent a very negative message about Arsenal. How could he? And at the same time, I believe that he's doing a great job with the team. So, yeah, I mean, any critic to Mikel Arteta when it comes to his public persona, especially as a representative of Arsenal, I wouldn't understand it.
Yeah, I'm very much of that same thinking, is that he can only say as much as he's incapable of saying. You can't just suddenly throw the owners under the bus, or throw Edu under the bus for not necessarily getting the deals done that he wants. And I think that often people get very emotional about their club and expect sort of the manager and the players to have that same attachment to the club that they have in a fan sense. So I can completely understand that frustration that people may have, but I think it's completely right that his demeanor. Go on.
And also, Tom, I mean, if Arsenal managed to navigate the pandemic and all the financial crisis deriving from it, but we all know that Arsenal also have to downgrade the salaries of the players a little bit, at least for a period of time, right? So how could Mikel Arteta speak badly publicly about the recruitment if some of his players they haven't had their 100% of their salaries? You know what I mean? There is also a respect to have for your players. I mean, I know that they make a lot of money, but they make a lot of money because they sign for it, and they have signed a contract, and they want to get 100% of it. So Mikel Arteta obviously knows that as well. He's with the players too. So I think that if he asks for signings, he will do it to Edu, but not publicly, because he has to be respectful as well with the players he's got at his disposal.
Yeah. Definitely. It's all about that respect level as well, 100%. And then looking at kind of those players within it and the Spanish players that he's got at the club, Hector Bellerin is a really interesting kind of case study at the moment, because he had that really long injury, 2 long injuries, in fact, where he had a recurring sort of knee problem. He's come back and he completely splits the fan base. A lot of the fan base look at him as sort of a long-term lover of Arsenal. He loves Arsenal. It's clear to see that he loves the club. But the way that he's performed, in a way, if you're being very critical, has kind of stagnated. His development is kind of frozen at this point, and he's not really pushed on after that injury. And then there's been links this season with the likes of Barcelona. Supposedly Arsenal were asking for too much money that they are willing to buy, and obviously they've gone in and got Serginho Dest from Ajax in the end, of course. And then you had PSG that were also linked to him, and then they ended up getting in Florenzi, from Roma. So what do you kind of make of the Bellerin situation currently, and where do you kind of see him in the future?
Well, I think that Hector Bellerin is a little bit at crossroads now, because he got this difficult injury. I mean, he hasn't been the same player since he came back, even though before the injury, I think that Hector Bellerin had his ups and downs, and sometimes, in my opinion, he was too reliant on his speed, and there were some technical deficiencies that, in my opinion, he had to improve. Like, for example, he had to be closer when he was marking, and he wasn't doing that because he was relying on his speed to catch any player that dribbled him, you know. After the injury, I think that he has lost a little bit of that spark when it comes to the speed. And at this moment, Mikel Arteta won't accept a right back that makes many mistakes. I believe that, for example, against Liverpool, when he was under the pressure of Sadio Mane, who, by the way, Mane, I believe that he was hyper inflated against Arsenal, especially at the beginning of the game, with an attitude that I never understood very well. Tom, you saw that as well. And
was it a red card, you think? Would you say that was a red card, what he did?
Yeah. I would say that that was not to Hector Bellerin, it was to Tierney, right?
He did go in on Bellerin, I think, at one point.
He didn't go on him as well, So, but at that game, Hector Bellerin had like the perfect pressure. I mean, the perfect storm was against him, with Robertson and Sadio Mane playing on the left. I believe that El Neni had to help him a little bit, and also Willian. But he wasn't sure with the ball. Sometimes he wasn't confident. He gave a couple of ridiculous passes to the opposition. And these are the kind of players that Hector Bellerin has to play well in if he wants to consider himself an elite player. And I believe that the other day, Hector Bellerin was miles away from, for example, the quality of the Liverpool fullbacks. Maybe 2 seasons ago, you wouldn't have said that in the comparison between Robertson and Bellerin, but there has been definitely an improvement in Andy Robertson. And Hector Bellerin, as you said before, is a little bit stagnant. I believe that this is a key moment for him. So far, he's going to play. And he has to improve his game quickly because Mikel Arteta, as we said before, he wants the perfect professionals to be at his disposal, the perfect players to be at his disposal. And Hector Bellerin cannot have a dip in form, especially if Arsenal wants to make it to European football or qualify for Champions League.
I think that when you look at what Bellerin has kind of the journey that he's been on, that injury is such a huge point in his career that it was always going to be the way he came back from that would kind of define the second half of his time at the club. Being in the middle of his 20s now, being one of the leaders, one of the former captains that was selected by Unai Emery, he needed to be that leader within the group. And the way that he performed on the pitch had to lead that team forward. And having difficult performances, especially when you consider the type of fan base that we at Arsenal have, which is, I've always described it as very reactionary. We wear our heart on our sleeve, I think, as Arsenal fans, and get very frustrated when players don't necessarily perform to the ability that we know they can do. So Bellerin this season, if he stays, which looks exceptionally more likely than it did, say, a couple of weeks ago, it will be, in my opinion, a defining season for him. One player that's kind of, I wasn't sure if he was going to be here this season. I prayed that he was, based on how he finished last season, is Dani Ceballos. And when he came in for the second time, it was for me such a relief. And I said at the end of the last season, we had to make Ceballos a priority because he's already transitioned. He's already used to what Arsenal and Arteta want. Really good partnership with Granit Xhaka in the middle of the pitch as well. Because he joined, and if you remember back, I don't know if you remember back to it, but he had an amazing debut at home against Burnley in which he lit up the Emirates with his technical ability, his skill, the way he was turning players, and he had a real man of the match performance. His tackle in the final third went to Aubameyang that got the winning goal towards the end of the game. And after that, things kind of deteriorated. Things kind of got worse under Unai Emery. Now, I always kind of put that down to maybe Emery's passive style having an impact on the way that he was able to express himself during games, maybe. Because under Arteta, he just kind of was reinvigorated again. He had a couple of injuries, but he then just kind of turned things around and really did the what we call the dirty side of the game, I suppose, where he was defending, getting back, being in that defensive part of the pitch. So were you surprised at the role that he was eventually asked to play by Arteta? And what did you make of that kind of whole season in general?
Well, I think that Mikel Arteta trusts on Dani Ceballos. Mikel Arteta was, at the end of his career, somehow a similar player to Dani Ceballos in the sense that he was covering more ground that he would have thought he was going to cover when he was a Barcelona academy player. Yeah. And Dani Ceballos can cover all that ground. I believe that Dani Ceballos under Zinedine Zidane is a story that won't have a happy ending because Zinedine Zidane is sticking to stubbornly with the players that gave him the Champions League title, Toni Kroos, Luka Modric, Casemiro, and Dani Ceballos just simply doesn't play for Real Madrid. So the best thing for him was leaving. And I believe that at Arsenal, he has found a crowd that likes him, even though he cannot feel the spirit of the crowd right now, unfortunately. And more importantly, a manager that won't punish him necessarily if he takes some risks. So Dani Ceballos can play with the certainty and the assurance that he can take some risks in the midfield. I saw that the other day against Liverpool, for example, when Dani Ceballos was capable of getting the ball and just turning to the right and to the left and leaving Liverpool players behind, which is not easy because the Liverpool pressure is very good. And I know that the game with the 2-1 and the 3-1 especially was a little bit broken already, but Dani Ceballos was some sort of reigning in that little chaos. So I really think that he's one of those players that Arsenal needs because he provides some really good quality in the midfield. He's a sharp passer, but I think that one of his greatest abilities is that he never stops trying again. And there is a massive difference between the Dani Ceballos we saw last season against Liverpool in the first round of the Premier League when he lost that very silly ball in defense on the left channel. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
In the first half, that Dani Ceballos that. For some reason, he was scared to try, and he was scared especially to make mistakes. And this Dani Ceballos that has the full backing of Mikel Arteta. So I think that the partnership or the marriage between Arteta and Dani Ceballos is going to be very good for Arsenal. Hopefully, it will last a lot. And Dani Ceballos will stay at Arsenal for a long time because he's a really good midfielder. And there are two very good things for Dani Ceballos at the minute. Not only Mikel Arteta trusts him a lot, but also Luis Enrique, the Spanish national manager. In 2018, when Luis Enrique took over, became the manager of the Spanish national team, Dani Ceballos was one of those players that wasn't playing for Real Madrid a lot, but Luis Enrique put him or got him in his first list, which means that two big managers are backing him, and this is going to be really important for his career because Dani Ceballos needs something like that at his age. He's 24, right? He needs something like that. Two managers, good managers that believe on the way he plays.
Yeah, it is wonderful to see him finally sort of flourishing because I had so much hope watching him at Betis and seeing what he was capable of in kind of more of an advanced role than he's playing for at Arsenal. But certainly what he's been able to do in that area is kind of discover, I suppose, a part of his game that maybe he didn't even necessarily know that he had in the tenacity of being in that back line and tackling. I don't know if there was a game, when he laid off the assist for Eddie Nketiah, that winning the ball back and then going and pushing forward to set that ball up was just such an epitome of what he's done and what he's changed about his game so far. So it is a real pleasure.
Yeah, I think that we didn't know that Dani Ceballos had that pugnacious element in his game, and I am discovering that as the games go by, a little bit like you. We know about his technique. We also know that he is a player that doesn't hide himself. He tries, and now he's got the backing of the manager to execute every time of pass and every time of dribble, always in the areas where you can do it, of course. And he's gonna grow as a player. I believe that also what happened in summer 2019 when Spain won the Spanish Under-21 Championship with Dani Ceballos being, in my opinion, the best player of Spain, helped him a lot. He arrived in Premier League, then he didn't have the best of the experiences under Unai Emery. He had to adapt as well to a new team, don't forget. Yeah. And since Arteta took over, I mean, it's been all good for Dani Ceballos, really. I'm not saying that he's playing well every single game because there is a learning curve still in Dani Ceballos, but Arsenal doesn't have this kind of player anymore, or they don't have a midfielder like that who can filter those passes and drive the ball so well. So he's going to play a lot simply because if you look around in the squad, there are no players like this unless Alvaro arrives, and then, okay, probably around the fan base of Arsenal, there will be this debate, who is better, Ceballos or Alvaro, but until then, Dani Ceballos is the differential element in that midfield.
100%. He is the driving force of that midfield right through the centre of the pitch. And I think that I'm really looking, if we do sign Alvaro, that combination, because I think Sabas, the way that he's kind of evolved and transformed, that you can play into that sort of number 6/8 position now in the midfield with Alvaro possibly in front of him, provides something really evocative of a real creative and dynamic side. So with Granit Xhaka there, I'd have loved if it was Thomas Partey. It doesn't seem to be that will be the case. But seeing those two that could possibly really cause some teams some damage centrally for Arsenal, which has kind of been something we've lacked, is going to be really, really key.
Yeah, Tom, but don't forget that there are only 11 players who can play. So if that happens, if that happens, probably Mikel Arteta will have to, if he wants to accommodate in the same team, Aouar and Dani Ceballos and Granit Xhaka, maybe he has to change the 3-man centre back, and at the same time, that defensive line is really good. I mean, it's one of the keys of the recent success of Arsenal, I would say. So I wouldn't relinquish to the 3-man centre back in there. No way.
No. It's. I think a lot of Arsenal fans want to see it change to 4 and want it to change because we used to love the 4-2-3-1, but I think they want to see it change. We might see it change. We'll have to wait and see. It depends on these last couple of days, I think. Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to Alvaro. It's been genuinely, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and often I don't get to talk about Spanish football that much, and the listeners know how much I enjoy talking about it. So it's been a real pleasure. Really appreciate your time, mate.
Thank you. Anytime. I loved it as well, and good luck with the channel. I mean, I can see that you know about the Spanish football, man. I can see you've done your homework.
Thank you. Thank you, mate. That is genuine. That means a lot, and maybe that will shut some of the haters up regarding Spanish football. Fantastic stuff. Thank you. Make sure you go check out Alvaro on Twitter. What is your? Can you just tell the people your Twitter handle so they can find you?
Yeah, it's Alvaro_Romeo. So you will find me there.
Simple as that. Easy peasy. You can find us, of course, at the Goonatal TV. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed the chat here with Alvaro. And we will see you again very, very soon. And, of course, as always, up the Arsenal.